Welcome back to part 2 of Elena's story. If you're finding us for the first time, stop right here and watch part 1 first. The link is in the description and pinned in the comments. You need to see how Elena went from a waitress hiding her past to confronting the man who stole everything from her. For those of you coming back, thank you. Your loyalty means a great deal to us. I know you've been waiting to see if Elena finally gets justice and what Ethan's plan is. But before we dive in, subscribe so we're never parted, and hit like if you're rooting for Elena. Now, let's find out what happens when she walks back into the office where her nightmare began. For everyone who's been waiting to see what happens next, thank you for coming back. Let's dive right in. Ethan's office occupied the entire top floor of a gleaming tower in downtown Crossing, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of Boston Harbor. Elena tried not to stare as they walked through the reception area, where assistants in designer suits moved with quiet efficiency, and everything from the furniture to the artwork whispered wealth and refined taste. Mr. Harrison. His assistant rose as they approached, her professional smile faltering slightly when she saw Elena. You're not scheduled to be in today. Change of plans, Rachel. Hold my calls for the next hour. Ethan guided Elena toward the massive double doors of his private office. And Rachel, I want complete confidentiality on this meeting. Of course, sir. Elena felt the weight of Rachel's curious gaze as they passed, and she was acutely aware of how out of place she looked in her simple navy dress amid all this corporate luxury. Ethan's office was even more impressive than the reception area, a masculine space of dark wood and leather that somehow felt warm rather than intimidating. Drink? Ethan moved toward a sidebar lined with an array of premium bottles and beautiful cut crystal decanters that caught the light. I'm fine, thank you. Elena remained standing near the door, suddenly unsure why she'd agreed to come here. Ethan, what exactly are you hoping to accomplish? Even if everything I've told you is true, Nathan is still your business partner. You can't what? Hold him accountable for his actions. Ethan poured himself 2 fingers of scotch. Elena, if Nathan Simons destroyed your life for his own profit, then he's exactly the kind of person I don't want as a partner. But the money, there's always another deal. Ethan settled into one of the leather chairs facing his desk and gestured for Elena to join him. There's not always another chance to do the right thing. Elena perched on the edge of the chair across from Ethan, her entire body tense with nervous energy. You say that now, but when you see the numbers involved, when your board starts asking questions, my board works for me, not the other way around. Ethan's tone was mild, but Elena caught the steel underneath. And the numbers don't matter if they're built on fraud. He leaned forward, his grey eyes intense. Tell me about the patents, Elena. Nathan's company has registered 14 patents over the last 2 years, all related to algorithmic trading and risk assessment. How many of those did you develop? Elena's breath caught. How did you know? Because I've been reviewing Apex's assets as part of our due diligence, and something about the filing dates bothered me. 14 patents, all filed within 6 months of each other, all supposedly developed by Nathan's team. Ethan pulled out a tablet and scrolled through several documents. But when I looked at Nathan's educational background and his previous work history, there was nothing that suggested he had the technical expertise to develop this kind of sophisticated financial modeling. Elena felt like the room was spinning. You investigated him. I investigate all my potential partners. The question is, why didn't I find any mention of you in the company's history? Ethan's voice was gentle, but his questions were surgical in their precision. If you were truly a partner for 3 years, if you contributed to the development of these technologies, there should be records, incorporation documents, partnership agreements, and employee files. Because Nathan erased me. Elena's voice came out barely above a whisper. After he filed the charges, after he convinced everyone that I was a thief, he had my name removed from everything. Partnership agreements were rewritten to show I was only ever an employee. Patent applications were amended to remove my name from the inventor credits. He made it look like I never existed. Ethan was quiet for several seconds, his fingers steepled in front of his face. Elena, that level of systematic documentation fraud is not just unethical, it's criminal. Good luck proving it. Nathan is very thorough, and he has very expensive lawyers, Elena sighed, her voice heavy with resignation. So do I. Ethan reached for his phone. Rachel, get me Thomas Brennan at Brennan & Associates. Yes, I know it's Saturday. Tell him it's urgent. Elena shot to her feet. Ethan, no. You can't. This will destroy your deal. Good. Ethan's voice was flat, final. If this deal is built on stolen intellectual property, then it needs to be destroyed. You don't understand what you're risking. And you don't understand what I'm worth. Ethan set his phone aside and stood to face her. Elena, I could lose this entire deal and 10 more like it and still have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. What I can't afford to lose is my integrity. The simple statement hit Elena like a physical blow. When was the last time someone had chosen principles over profit? When was the last time someone had risked anything real to defend her? Why, she asked, the word barely audible. Why are you doing this? Ethan moved closer, close enough that Elena could see the flecks of silver in his grey eyes and smell his subtle cologne. Because yesterday you could have simply taken my mother's compliments to the chef and walked away. Instead, you spent 10 minutes talking to her about her travels, asking about her experiences, treating her like a person instead of an inconvenience. He paused, his voice dropping to something almost intimate. Because you speak 5 languages, but you're serving wine for tips. Because you have a Harvard MBA, but you're worried about whether your boss thinks you're more trouble than you're worth. Because everything about you suggests someone who's been systematically diminished by people who should have valued you. Elena felt tears threatening again. You're going to regret this when the lawyers start asking questions, when your board wants explanations, when Nathan starts fighting back. Let me worry about Nathan. Ethan reached out slowly, giving Elena time to pull away, and brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. The question is, are you ready to fight back? The touch was gentle, almost reverent, and Elena found herself leaning into it despite every rational thought in her head. I don't know how anymore. He took everything, Ethan. My work, my reputation, my confidence. I don't even know who I am without all of that. I know who you are. Ethan's other hand came up to frame her face, his touch warm against her skin. You're someone who spent 3 years building a company from nothing. Someone who developed technology advanced enough to make Nathan Simons willing to commit fraud to steal it. Someone who lost everything and still found the grace to be kind to a lonely old woman in a restaurant. His thumbs traced across her cheekbones, and Elena felt something inside her chest crack open, something that had been frozen solid for 2 years. You're someone worth fighting for, Elena Michaels. The question is, do you believe that? Elena stared up at him, this impossible man who was willing to risk millions of dollars for someone he'd known for 2 days. Everything about the situation was insane. The timing, the circumstances, the way her heart was racing from his touch. But for the first time in 2 years, Elena felt like herself again. Not the diminished, frightened woman Nathan had created, but the person she'd been before, intelligent, capable, and worth defending. I want to believe it, she whispered. Then let me prove it to you. Before Elena could ask what he meant, Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his expression hardened. What is it? Elena asked. Text from Nathan. He wants to move up our meeting to Monday. Says he has some exciting new developments to discuss. Elena felt ice form in her stomach. Ethan, you have to be careful. If he even suspects that you know about me. He won't. Ethan's smile was sharp, predatory. Because as far as Nathan Simons knows, I'm just another greedy businessman interested in his profit margins. He has no idea what's coming. Elena wanted to warn him again, to explain just how dangerous Nathan could be when cornered. But the determination in Ethan's eyes reminded her of something she'd almost forgotten. What it felt like to have someone in her corner, someone willing to fight her battles alongside her. What do you need me to do? She asked quietly. Ethan's expression softened. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Trust. The word that Nathan had weaponized against her, that she'd sworn never to give to anyone again. But looking into Ethan's grey eyes, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in 2 years, the fragile stirring of hope. "Yes," she said, and meant it. "I can do that." Ethan's smile was like a sunrise after the longest night. "Good. Because Monday morning, Nathan Simons is going to discover that his past has finally caught up with him." As Ethan pulled her into his arms, Elena allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, she could finally get the justice she deserved. And if so, at least she wouldn't be facing Nathan's wrath alone this time. For the first time in 2 years, Elena Michaels was no longer running. She was ready to fight back. Monday morning arrived with the kind of grey, overcast sky that seemed to mirror Elena's mood as she sat in the coffee shop across from Ethan's building, watching the entrance through rain-streaked windows. He'd insisted she stay away from the office during his meeting with Nathan, but she couldn't bring herself to go home and wait helplessly while 2 men in expensive suits decided her future. Her phone buzzed. "Meeting starts in 10 minutes. Remember, whatever happens, Nathan doesn't know you're involved. Stay safe." Elena's hands trembled as she typed back, "Be careful. He's more dangerous than you think." The response came immediately. "I know. But so am I." Elena stared at the message, trying to draw comfort from Ethan's confidence. But she knew Nathan in ways Ethan couldn't imagine. She knew how he could twist the truth, how he could make victims look like villains and monsters look like heroes. She'd watched him destroy other people's lives with the same calculating precision he'd used on her. 43 floors above her, Ethan Harrison was about to discover just how thoroughly Nathan Simons had played them all. Ethan straightened his tie and checked his reflection in the conference room's floor-to-ceiling windows. Everything had to be perfect: his appearance, his demeanor, his questions. Nathan could never suspect that this was anything more than routine due diligence. "Mr. Harrison," Rachel's voice came through the intercom. "Mr. Simons has arrived. Send him in." The conference room doors opened, and Nathan Simons walked in with the kind of confident stride that belonged to a man who believed he owned the world. He was shorter than Ethan had remembered, with perfectly styled black hair and a smile that seemed genuine until you looked closely at his eyes. "Ethan, good to see you." Nathan extended his hand with practiced warmth. "Thanks for moving this up. I know your schedule is insane." "Not a problem." Ethan shook the offered hand, noting the firm grip, the expensive watch, the manicured nails. Everything about Nathan screamed success, competence, trustworthiness. "Coffee, please." "So I've been thinking about our timeline, and I believe we can accelerate the merger by at least 6 weeks. Nathan accepted the cup with a grateful nod. "My team has identified some additional assets that weren't in the original proposal." Ethan poured coffee from the silver service, his movements deliberately casual. "Additional assets?" "Intellectual property mainly. Some proprietary algorithms that we've been developing internally." Nathan settled into his chair. "I wanted to run the numbers by you before we involve the lawyers." "I appreciate that." Ethan sat down, every muscle in his body coiled with tension he was determined not to show. "Tell me about these algorithms. Are they related to the risk assessment protocols you mentioned last month?" Nathan's smile widened. "Exactly. It's revolutionary stuff, predictive modeling that can identify market patterns up to 18 months in advance. It's going to revolutionize how we approach portfolio management." "Impressive. Did your team develop these in-house?" "Absolutely. My lead researcher is a brilliant PhD from Stanford with years of experience in quantitative analysis. We've been working on this technology for over 3 years." Ethan nodded thoughtfully, making notes on the legal pad in front of him. "And this researcher, are they comfortable with the merger?" "No concerns about intellectual property rights, patent disputes, that sort of thing?" "None at all. Clean development chain, all work done under the company contract. My legal team has been very thorough about documentation." The lies came so smoothly, so confidently, that Ethan felt a cold rage building in his chest. Elena had been right. Nathan was a master manipulator, capable of rewriting history without even breaking a sweat. A theft not just of Elena's work, but of her very existence. The casual way he referred to their partnership while erasing her completely was breathtaking in its cruelty. I'd love to meet this researcher. Always interested in the minds behind the innovation. Nathan's pause was barely perceptible. Unfortunately, she's in London right now, working on implementation with our European partners. Very hands-on approach, you understand. She's brilliant, but not much for corporate meetings. Ethan caught the slip. Nathan had said she instead of the fictional male PhD he'd mentioned before. His jaw tightened, but he kept his expression neutral. Of course. Well, when she returns, I'd appreciate an introduction. Naturally. I'll have my assistant prepare a comprehensive package. Nathan pulled out his phone, fingers flying over the screen. Should have everything to you by the end of the week. Ethan nodded, making another note. Perfect. And Nathan, I appreciate your transparency about the additional assets. Trust is the foundation of any successful partnership. Absolutely. Nathan's smile was radiant with what appeared to be genuine warmth. Honesty in business isn't just ethical, it's profitable. Lies have a way of catching up with you eventually. The irony was so thick Ethan could taste it. I couldn't agree more. They spent another 30 minutes reviewing financial projections and merger timelines, Nathan painting a picture of exponential growth and market dominance that would have been compelling if Ethan hadn't known it was built on theft and fraud. When Nathan finally left, his handshake was firm and his demeanor confident. Ethan waited until he heard the elevator doors close before pulling out his phone. Call Thomas Brennan. Now. Elena was on her third cup of coffee when her phone rang. Ethan's name on the screen made her heart skip a beat. How did it go? She asked without preamble. Exactly as you predicted. He lied about everything. The development timeline, the research team, and the funding sources. Ethan's voice carried an edge of disgust. And Elena, he's claiming his lead researcher is a woman with a PhD from Stanford. Anna's laugh was bitter. Let me guess, this mysterious researcher is conveniently unavailable for meetings. In London, apparently. Very hands-on, but not much for corporate environments. How convenient. Elena closed her eyes, feeling the familiar weight of Nathan's manipulations. Did he seem suspicious about your questions? Not at all. He was practically glowing with what he clearly thought was his own cleverness. Ethan paused. Elena, I've met some unscrupulous people in my career, but the casual way he erased your existence is sociopathic. I tried to warn you. You did, and you were right about everything. There was a pause, then Ethan's voice became gentler. How are you holding up? Elena looked around the coffee shop at the normal people living normal lives, unaware that their simple Monday morning was the most surreal experience of her recent memory. I keep waiting for his next move. Nathan doesn't make mistakes, Ethan. If he's being this cavalier about the lies, it's because he thinks he's already won. What do you mean? I mean he's planning something. Nathan doesn't just react to threats, he anticipates them and neutralizes them before they become problems. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain outside. Ethan, what if he knows? What if this whole thing is some elaborate trap? That's impossible. There's no way he could know we've been in contact. Are you sure? Think about it. You ask him about someone from Harvard, someone with a language background who claims to know him. Then 3 days later, you're suddenly asking detailed questions about his development team and intellectual property chains. That's one hell of a coincidence. Ethan was quiet for several seconds. You think he's figured out that you're the Harvard connection? I think Nathan Simons doesn't believe in coincidences any more than you do. Shit. Ethan's voice was tight with worry. Elena, where are you right now? Coffee shop across from your building. Why? Because if you're right, if Nathan has figured out our connection, then you're not safe. He destroyed your life once when you were an inconvenience. What do you think he'll do if he sees you as a direct threat? Elena felt ice forming in her stomach. She'd been so focused on the possibility of justice, on the hope of vindication, that she hadn't fully considered what Nathan might do to protect himself. And Nathan had never been one to leave loose ends. Ethan, I should disappear. Tonight. Leave the city, change my name again. No. Ethan's voice was firm. Running didn't work the first time, and it won't work now. Nathan will just follow you, and next time you won't have anyone watching your back. Then what do you suggest? I suggest we force his hand. Make him come to us instead of letting him hunt you down on his timeline. Elena's grip on her phone tightened. That's suicide. You don't understand what he's capable of. And you don't understand what I'm capable of. Ethan's tone carried a confidence that was both reassuring and terrifying. Elena, I didn't build $1 billion company by backing down from fights. And I sure as hell am not going to let Nathan Simons intimidate the woman I. He stopped abruptly, and Elena's heart stuttered. The woman you what? She whispered. The woman I care about, Ethan said quietly. More than I should, considering we've known each other for 3 days. But there it is. Elena felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Ethan, I know it's crazy. I know the timing is terrible and the circumstances are impossible, but I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since Saturday night. The way you talked to my mother, the way you stood up to me when I was being presumptuous, the strength it took to rebuild your life after Nathan destroyed it. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're brilliant and kind and stronger than you think you are. I know you deserve justice, and I know I want to be the one to help you get it. Ethan paused. And I know that I'm not letting Nathan Simons hurt you again. Elena wiped away a tear, amazed that she had any left after 2 years of crying. What if we can't prove what he did? What if his lawyers are better than yours? What if? Then we'll deal with that when it happens. But Elena, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Trust. The word that had become her enemy, the concept that Nathan had poisoned so thoroughly that Elena had thought she'd never be able to embrace it again. But sitting in this ordinary coffee shop, listening to Ethan promise to fight for her, Elena felt something shift in her chest. Maybe trust wasn't about never being hurt again. Perhaps it was about believing that someone was worth the risk of being hurt. Yes, she said softly. I trust you. Good. Because I have a plan. 20 minutes later, Elena was back in Ethan's office, listening to him outline a strategy that was either brilliant or completely insane. You want me to call Nathan directly? Elena stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Ethan, that's exactly what he's expecting. He's probably already planning how to use any contact from me against us. That's what makes it perfect. Ethan was pacing behind his desk, his energy crackling with determination. He expects you to hide, to stay in the shadows while other people fight your battles. The last thing he's prepared for is you walking straight into his office and demanding answers. Because it's suicide. Because it's unexpected. Ethan stopped pacing and fixed her with an intense stare. Elena, think about it. For 2 years, you've been running from Nathan, letting him control the narrative. What if you stopped running? What if you took control back? Elena felt a flutter of something that might have been excitement mixing with her terror. Even if I wanted to confront him, which I don't. What would be the point? He'll just lie, manipulate, turn it around on me like he always does. Not if you're not going in alone. Ethan pulled out his phone. I'm going to call Nathan right now. I'm going to tell him that my technical team has identified some inconsistencies in his IP documentation, and I need to meet with his lead researcher to clarify a few points. Ethan's smile was sharp. He'll make excuses, he'll remind you that the researcher is in London, remember? Said Elena, starting to feel defeated. Then I'll tell him it's urgent enough to fly the researcher back. I'll make it clear that the deal depends on it. Trust me, Nathan won't risk losing this merger over a simple meeting. Ethan's confidence was absolute. Elena felt her pulse quicken. And then? Then you walk into that meeting as Dr. Elena Michaels, independent consultant specializing in algorithmic trading systems. Someone I've hired to verify the authenticity of his intellectual property. The audacity of the plan took Elena's breath away. He'll recognize me immediately. Of course he will. And he'll be so shocked that he'll reveal more than he intends to. Ethan's eyes gleamed. Nathan's strength is his ability to control situations, to manipulate from the shadows. But put him face to face with someone he thought he destroyed, someone who's clearly not the broken victim he expected, he'll make mistakes. Elena could see the logic, but the thought of facing Nathan again made her feel sick. What if he refuses to meet? What if he calls security? What if he tries to have me arrested? On what charges? Being in a business meeting. Ethan moved around the desk to stand in front of her, his hand settling gently on her shoulders. Elena, you're not a fugitive. You were never even formally charged with anything. Nathan's power over you exists only as long as you believe it does. He paused, his grey eyes searching hers. I know you're scared. I know the last time you trusted someone, it ended in disaster. But this time is different. How? Said Elena, returning his gaze. Because this time you're not alone. This time, you have someone who believes you, someone who's willing to fight for you. This time, you have me. Elena looked up into his eyes and saw something that made her chest tighten with emotion. Not pity, not charity, but genuine care. Respect. The kind of partnership she'd thought she'd had with Nathan, but real this time. What if we're wrong? She whispered. What if this destroys your company, your reputation, everything you've worked for? Then I'll rebuild. But Elena, I can't rebuild my integrity if I walk away from this. I can't look at myself in the mirror if I let Nathan Simons win. His voice dropped to an almost intimate tone. And I can't lose you now that I've found you. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that Elena wasn't sure she was ready to handle. But the sincerity in Ethan's expression, the gentle way he was touching her, the absolute certainty in his voice, it all combined to break through the last of her resistance. Okay, she said quietly. Let's do it. Ethan's smile was like a sunrise. You're sure? I'm terrified. But yes. I'm sure. Elena took a deep breath, feeling something shift inside her chest. It's time to stop running. Ethan pulled her into his arms, then, holding her tight against his chest, and Elena allowed herself to draw strength from his warmth, his confidence, and his absolute faith that justice was possible. Tomorrow, she would face Nathan Simons for the first time in 2 years. Tomorrow, she would either reclaim her life or watch it be destroyed all over again. But tonight, for the first time since her world had collapsed, Elena Michaels felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The Apex Capital offices occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in the financial district. All clean lines and modern efficiency designed to project success and stability. Elena stood on the path across the street, staring up at the building that had once represented all her dreams, now turned into a monument to her nightmares. Second thoughts. Ethan appeared beside her, 2 coffee cups in hand. About 100 of them. Elena gratefully accepted the coffee, needing the warmth against the October chill. I used to love this building. Nathan and I picked it together, spent hours planning how we'd design the offices, talking about the company we were going to build. And you did build it. The fact that he stole credit doesn't change that. Elena looked at Ethan, taking in the expensive suit, the confident posture, the way he seemed to command space just by existing. Are you sure about this plan? Once we walk in there, there's no going back. I'm sure. Ethan's voice was steady, calm. The question is, are you ready? Elena thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago, confident, successful, naive enough to believe that hard work and talent were enough to protect her from people like Nathan. Then she thought about the woman she'd become, scared, diminished, invisible. But standing here with Ethan, feeling his absolute faith in her, Elena realized she didn't want to be either of those women anymore. She wanted to be someone new, someone who had been broken but had learned how to rebuild herself stronger. I'm ready, she said, and meant it. They crossed the street together, Ethan's hand warm and reassuring on the small of her back. The lobby was exactly as Elena remembered, marble floors, abstract art, and the kind of understated luxury that whispered rather than shouted about money. The security guard at the front desk looked up as they approached, his expression shifting to professional attention when he recognized Ethan. Mr. Harrison, good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, Marcus. We're here to see Nathan Simons. He's expecting us. Of course, sir. 28th floor. As they rode the elevator up, Elena felt her heart hammering against her ribs, the familiar numbers climbing on the display, 15, 20, 25. Each one bringing her closer to a confrontation she'd spent 2 years avoiding. Breathe, Ethan said quietly, his hand finding hers. Remember, you belong here. This company exists because of your work. The elevator doors opened onto the familiar reception area, all glass and chrome and carefully curated success. Behind the reception desk sat a young woman Elena didn't recognize. Nathan had clearly replaced the entire staff after Elena's departure. Mr. Harrison. The receptionist stood with a practiced smile. Mr. Simons is waiting for you in the main conference room. They followed her down a hallway lined with framed articles about Apex's success, awards for innovation, and photos of Nathan at various industry events. Elena's stomach clenched as she realized that in 2 years, Nathan had built an entire mythology around himself, a carefully crafted narrative in which she had never existed. The conference room doors opened. And there he was. Nathan Michaels looked exactly the same. Perfectly styled black hair, expensive suit, that practiced smile that had once made Elena's heart skip. He was standing at the head of the conference table, clearly positioned to project authority and control. For a moment, Elena felt herself shrinking back into the scared, diminished woman she'd been. Then Ethan's hand pressed against her back, warm and steady, and Elena remembered who she was fighting for. Ethan. Nathan's voice was warm, welcoming, giving no sign that anything was amiss. Right on time. And you must be Dr. Michaels. Nathan's eyes met Elena's across the room, and she saw the exact moment when recognition hit. His face went completely blank for perhaps 3 seconds, long enough for Elena to see shock, calculation, and something that might have been fear flicker across his features. Then the mask slammed back into place. I'm sorry, Nathan said, his voice carefully modulated. Have we met before? You look familiar. The casual dismissal, the pretense that she was a stranger, hit Elena like a physical blow. But instead of the crushing despair she'd expected, she felt something else entirely. Rage. Pure, clean, energizing fury that burned away 2 years of fear and self-doubt. We've met, Elena said quietly, walking into the room with her head held high. Though I'm not surprised you don't remember. You always were better at forgetting inconvenient people. Nathan's smile never wavered, but Elena caught the slight tightening around his eyes. I'm afraid I don't follow. Elena Michaels, she said clearly, extending her hand in a gesture of mock politeness. Former partner and co-founder of Apex Capital, though I believe your current version of history has me listed as never having existed. The silence that followed was deafening. Nathan stared at Elena's outstretched hand like it might bite him, while Ethan watched the entire exchange with sharp attention. I think there might be some confusion, Nathan said finally, not taking her hand. Apex has never had a partner named Elena Michaels. Really? Elena pulled out her phone and opened a photo album she'd thought she'd never use again. Then perhaps you can explain these. She showed him the screen. There was a photo of Nathan and Elena at Apex's launch party, arms around each other, both grinning at the camera. Nathan's face in the photo was radiant with what had appeared to be genuine love and pride. Nathan glanced at the photo and shrugged. I attend a lot of industry events. I'm sure I've taken pictures with hundreds of people over the years. Elena swiped to the next photo. Nathan and Elena in the office late at night, working on code together, her engagement ring clearly visible on her left hand. Then another, Nathan kissing Elena's cheek at what was clearly an intimate dinner, not a business function. Hundreds of people. Elena repeated quietly. Is that what I was to you, Nathan? Just another face in the crowd. I'm sorry, but I really don't know what you're hoping to accomplish here. Nathan turned to Ethan with an expression of confusion. Ethan, I'm not sure what this woman has told you, but this woman, Ethan interrupted, his voice deadly quiet, is Dr. Elena Michaels, who holds patents for 14 of the technologies your company claims to have developed. The same technologies you've been trying to sell to me as part of our merger. Nathan's mask slipped for just a moment, and Elena saw real fear flash across his face. That's impossible. All of Apex's intellectual property was developed internally by my team. Your team? Elena's voice was steady now, strengthened by 2 years of pain that had finally found its purpose. You mean the team of one Stanford PhD who's conveniently in London and unavailable for meetings? I don't know what game you're playing here. Nathan started to show signs of agitation. I'm not playing anything, Nathan. Elena pulled out a tablet and opened a file folder. I'm here to collect what you stole from me. Nathan laughed, a sound that was probably meant to convey incredulous amusement but came out strained and artificial. Stole? That's a very serious accusation. Yes, it is. Elena opened a document on her tablet. Would you like to see the original development notes for the risk assessment algorithm? The ones written in my handwriting, dated 8 months before you filed the patent. Or perhaps the emails where you asked me to explain the technical specifications because you couldn't understand the code. Nathan's calm facade was beginning to crumble. Anyone can forge documents. Yes, anyone can, Elena agreed. But these aren't forgeries. They're backups from my personal cloud storage, complete with metadata showing when they were created, when they were last modified, and what device they were created on. She looked directly into Nathan's eyes. Would you like to explain to Ethan why the foundational technology for your company was developed on my personal laptop? This is ridiculous. Nathan turned to Ethan, desperation creeping into his voice. Ethan, surely you can see what this is? Some disgruntled former employee trying to. Former employee? Elena's voice cut through his protestations like a blade. Is that what you're calling it now, Nathan? We were engaged for 2 years. We built this company together. We shared a bed, shared a life, shared dreams about the future we were going to create. She stood up, moving around the table until she was close enough to see the fear in Nathan's eyes. And when you decided you wanted it all for yourself, you didn't just steal my work. You stole my life. You destroyed my reputation, froze my assets, turned everyone against me, and then had the audacity to act like I never existed. Nathan attempted to defend himself. I never. But Elena interrupted him. You filed fraud charges against me that you knew were false, then dropped them at the last minute to make yourself look magnanimous while ensuring everyone still believed I was guilty. Elena's voice was rising now, 2 years of suppressed rage finally breaking free. You rewrote our partnership agreements to make me look like just an employee. You removed my name from patent applications. You erased me, Nathan. Nathan looked between Elena and Ethan, clearly calculating his options. Even if any of that were true, it is true, Ethan said quietly. Every word of it. Nathan's attention snapped to Ethan. You believe her? Ethan, this woman is clearly unstable. She's telling the truth. Ethan pulled out his own tablet, opening it to a document Elena recognized. Because my legal team has spent the last 3 days investigating Apex's intellectual property claims, and guess what we found? The color drained from Nathan's face. What do you mean? I mean that the original patent applications tell a very different story from the current ones. Metadata analysis shows that your patents were systematically altered to remove Elena's name as co-inventor. The dates of invention were changed. The technical specifications were rewritten to hide the fact that the work was done on external systems. Ethan stood up, his presence suddenly filling the room with quiet menace. We also found the original partnership agreements, Nathan. The ones that show Elena as an equal partner, not an employee. The ones that were altered 6 months after she left the company. Nathan's face had gone pale. Those are sealed corporate documents. You have no legal right. I have every legal right to investigate the intellectual property I'm considering purchasing. Ethan's voice was like ice. And what I've discovered is that you're trying to sell me stolen goods. This is insane, Nathan said, but his voice lacked conviction. You're talking about destroying a billion-dollar deal based on the word of a woman who created the technology that makes your company valuable, Elena finished. A woman who trusted you with everything and got betrayed for her faith. Nathan looked trapped, his usual smooth confidence completely shattered. Elena, look, maybe we can work something out. If you feel like you deserve compensation for your contributions, compensation. Elena's laugh was bitter. Nathan, you don't get to negotiate your way out of theft. You don't get to offer me a settlement for stealing my life's work. Then what do you want? Elena looked at the man who had once been everything to her. Who had shared her dreams, her bed, and her hopes for the future. And she felt nothing. I want justice, she said. I want the world to know who really built Apex Capital. I want my name restored to every patent, every article, every piece of work you've stolen. I want a full accounting of every dollar this company has made using my technology. She paused, her voice dropping to something almost intimate. And I want you to experience what it feels like to lose everything because someone you trusted decided to destroy you. Nathan stared at her in stunned silence, recognition dawning. The woman he'd tried to destroy had risen, fiercer and more resolute than he'd ever imagined. The deal is off, Ethan said quietly but firmly. Effective immediately. And Nathan, I'll be making sure that every potential partner knows exactly what kind of business practices Apex Capital engages in. Nathan shot to his feet, his composure finally cracking completely. You can't do this. The contracts. Ethan calmly cut him off. The contracts are void due to misrepresentation of assets. My lawyers are already preparing the documentation. I'll fight this, Nathan said, his voice shaking with rage. I'll destroy both of you. You'll what? Elena stood up, facing Nathan without flinching. Ruin my reputation? Steal my work? Turn everyone against me? You already did all of that, Nathan. You took your best shot, and I survived. She moved closer, close enough to see the fear in his eyes. But this time I'm not alone. This time, I have someone who believes me, someone who's willing to fight for the truth. This time, you're the one who's going to lose everything. Nathan looked between Elena and Ethan, his face cycling through rage, desperation, and something that might have been defeat. This isn't over, he said finally, his voice low and threatening. Yes, Elena said quietly, it is. As they walked out of the conference room, leaving Nathan sitting alone at his table, Elena felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she'd been carrying for 2 years. She wasn't the same broken woman who had fled this building in shame and terror. She was someone who had found her strength again, someone who had learned that justice was possible if you were brave enough to fight for it. And she was someone who had found a partner worthy of her trust. 6 months later, Elena stood in the kitchen of Ethan's Back Bay penthouse, watching the sunrise paint the city in shades of gold and pink. The newspaper on the counter bore a headline that still made her smile: Apex Capital founder sentenced to 5 years for corporate fraud. Below it, a smaller story: Michaels Technologies announces record profits in first quarter. Still reading about Nathan's downfall. Ethan appeared behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pressing a kiss to her neck. Can you blame me? 2 years of nightmares, and now he's the one behind bars. Elena leaned back against Ethan's chest, savoring the warmth and security of his embrace. Sometimes I still can't believe it's real. Believe it. Thomas's legal team was very thorough: fraud, theft of intellectual property, corporate malfeasance, and filing false financial documents. Nathan won't be bothering anyone for a very long time. Elena turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had changed everything. Any regrets about walking away from the biggest deal of your career? Are you kidding? Ethan's smile was soft, genuine. Walking away from that deal was the best decision I ever made. It led me to something much more valuable. What's that? You, he said, and kissed her forehead. Though I have to say, watching you rebuild your company from the ground up has been incredible. Michaels Technologies is going to change the industry. Elena felt a familiar flutter of pride. The last 6 months had been a whirlwind of legal battles, patent restorations, and building a new company from scratch. But with her name cleared and her technology returned to her, Elena had discovered that she was even more capable than she'd realized. Michaels Technologies already had contracts worth millions, and 3 major firms were competing to invest. We're going to change the industry, Elena corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without you. You could have. You just needed someone to remind you how strong you are. The soft sincerity in Ethan's voice made Elena's chest tighten with emotion. Even after 6 months, she sometimes couldn't believe that this was her life, waking up in Ethan's arms, building a company that was truly hers, and facing each day without fear or shame. "I have something for you," Ethan said, his tone shifting to something that sounded almost nervous. "It's not my birthday." "I know, but there's something I've been wanting to ask you, and I can't wait any longer." Elena felt her heart skip as Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. She held her breath as he dropped to one knee right there in the kitchen, the morning sunlight streaming through the windows and painting everything in soft gold. "Elena Michaels," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes, "6 months ago you walked into my life and turned everything upside down. You made me remember why integrity matters more than profit, why truth is worth fighting for, and most importantly why love is the best investment anyone can make." He opened the box, revealing a ring that took Elena's breath away. It was a classic and elegant solitaire without being ostentatious, beautiful without being showy. Exactly what she would have chosen for herself. "You've taught me that real strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up and becoming someone even better than you were before. You've shown me what it means to fight for what's right even when the odds are impossible." Ethan paused, his grey eyes shining with emotion. "I know we've only known each other for 6 months. I know it's fast, maybe even crazy. But Elena, I've never been more certain of anything in my life." He took a breath, his voice dropping to something intimate and tender. "I love you. I love your brilliant mind and your generous heart. I love your strength and your vulnerability. I love the way you sign with my mother and the way you make terrible coffee and the way you get this little crinkle between your eyebrows when you're concentrating on code." Elena felt tears streaming down her face, but they were happy tears, the kind she'd thought she'd forgotten how to cry. "Most of all," Ethan continued, "I love the way you've made me want to be a better man. You've made me believe in partnership that's real, in love that's based on respect and admiration and genuine care." He looked up at her with absolute sincerity. "Elena Michaels, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that not all partnerships end in betrayal, that love doesn't have to be dangerous?" Elena stared down at this incredible man who had risked everything to fight for her, who had seen her at her most broken and helped her become stronger than she'd ever been. The ring in the box caught the morning light, sending tiny rainbows dancing across the walls. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Ethan. Yes to all of it." Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger with surprisingly steady hands, then stood and kissed her with a tenderness that made Elena's knees weak. When they broke apart, both of them were crying and laughing at the same time. "I can't believe you proposed to me in your kitchen," Elena said, admiring the way the ring looked on her hand. "I couldn't wait for some fancy restaurant or romantic vacation. I wanted to ask you here, in the space where we've had our best conversations, where you've taught me how to really live instead of just existing." Elena looked around the kitchen that had become so familiar, so much like home, and realized he was right. This was where they'd planned strategy for the legal battles, where they'd celebrated each victory, where they'd learned to trust each other completely. "Besides," Ethan added with a grin, "after everything we've been through, I figured simple and honest was better than elaborate and performative." "Simple and honest," Elena repeated, thinking about how perfectly those words described what they'd built together. "I like that." Ethan pulled her close again, and Elena marveled at how safe she felt in his arms, how right this all seemed. A year ago, she'd been hiding in Somerville, convinced that her life was over, that trust was impossible, that love was just another word for vulnerability. Now she was engaged to a man who had proven that partnership could be about building each other up instead of tearing each other down, that love could be a source of strength instead of weakness. "So," Ethan said, his voice warm with amusement, "any thoughts on wedding planning? Please tell me you're not going to be one of those brides who want a year-long engagement and a wedding that costs more than most people's houses." Elena laughed, the sound bubbling up from a place of pure joy. "Actually, I was thinking something small, just family and close friends. Maybe your mother can teach me some more sign language before the ceremony. She's going to be thrilled. She's been dropping hints about grandchildren since our third date." "Grandchildren?" Elena raised an eyebrow. "We just got engaged 30 seconds ago. And you're already thinking about kids?" "With you, I'm thinking about everything, kids, grandkids, growing old together. The whole beautiful mess of building a life with someone. Ethan's expression grew serious. Elena, I know Nathan hurt you badly. I know trust doesn't come easily anymore. But I want you to know that I'm in this for the long haul. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. Elena felt her heart swell with an emotion so big she could barely contain it. I know, she said softly. I trust you, Ethan. Completely. The words would have terrified her 6 months ago, but now they felt right for both of them. She'd learned that trust wasn't about never being hurt again. It was about choosing to believe that some people were worth the risk. And Ethan Harrison was definitely worth the risk. Good, Ethan said, kissing her again. Because I have some ideas about our honeymoon that require a significant amount of trust. Oh, really? Elena's eye sparkled with mischief. What kind of ideas? The kind that involves Barcelona, champagne, and showing you that not all Spanish connections end in heartbreak. Elena felt a momentary pang at the mention of Barcelona, the city where she'd once thought she'd build a life with Nathan, where her dreams had first begun to take shape. But looking into Ethan's eyes, she realized that those old dreams had been small, limited by her inability to imagine that someone could love her without trying to diminish her. Barcelona sounds perfect, she said, meaning it. As long as you promise not to propose again. I don't think my heart can take any more surprises today. Deal. But I reserve the right to surprise you in other ways. What kind of other ways? Ethan's smile was mysterious, full of promises and possibilities. You'll have to trust me. I do, Elena said, and realized she meant it completely. I trust you with everything. As they stood together in the morning light, Elena thought about how far she'd come from the terrified woman hiding in Somerville, convinced that her life was over. She'd learned that endings could be beginnings, that losing everything could teach you what was truly valuable, that the worst betrayal could lead to the most authentic love. Nathan Simons had tried to erase her from existence, but instead, he'd forced her to discover who she really was when everything else was stripped away. And who she was, it turned out, was someone strong enough to rebuild, brave enough to fight, and wise enough to recognize real love when she found it. So, Ethan said, his arms tightening around her, ready to start planning the rest of our lives. Elena looked at her engagement ring sparkling in the morning sunlight, then up at the man who had helped her remember that she was worth fighting for. I'm ready, she said, and for the first time in years, she meant it without reservation. The future stretched out before them, bright with possibility and rich with promise. And Elena Michaels, soon to be Elena Harrison, was finally ready to embrace it all. Outside the windows, the city hummed with life and energy. Full of people starting their own new chapters, fighting their own battles, discovering their own strength. Somewhere in a federal prison, Nathan Simons was beginning to understand what it felt like to lose everything. But here in this kitchen, filled with morning light and laughter and love, Elena and Ethan were just beginning to understand what it meant to have everything that truly mattered. And it was more beautiful than either of them had ever dared to dream. Thanks for watching. If you liked this story, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what kind of stories you want more of. Your ideas might inspire the next one.